6 months had passed since the first contact between humanity and the Valoric's hegemony. In that time, the galaxy had changed more than anyone had anticipated. News of the encounter had spread across both civilizations, sparking debates that ranged from excited enthusiasm to deep concern. But in the end, hope had won out over fear. Commander Zorath stood before the hegemony council on the capital world of Valoria Prime. The great chamber was filled with representatives from all 17 member species, each one studying him with expressions that ranged from curiosity to suspicion. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment, gathering evidence and crafting arguments that he hoped would change the future. He began by describing his initial encounter with the USS Resolute. He did not hide his fear. He told them honestly that he had looked upon that warship and believed his entire fleet was about to die. The humans had seemed like monsters, predators from a nightmare world, armed with weapons that could destroy anything the hegemony possessed. But then he told them what he had learned. He spoke of Captain Daniel Hayes, a warrior who preferred peace. He spoke of Dr. Marie Sullivan, a scientist with a gentle soul who had befriended Valoric's crew members within hours of meeting them. He spoke of the 2 security officers who had taught young Valoric's how to play something called poker, and had lost more games than they won with perfect good humor. He told the council about human history, their long struggle to survive on a hostile world, their countless wars against each other before finally achieving unity, their fierce determination to protect those they cared about, regardless of the cost. He admitted that humans were dangerous, perhaps the most dangerous species the hegemony had ever encountered. But he argued that this made them valuable allies rather than potential enemies. The council debated for 3 days. Representatives from species that bordered hostile territory spoke in favor of the alliance. They had seen aggressive neighbors eyeing their worlds with hunger. They knew that their own forces could not stop a determined invasion, but humanity could. Humanity had proven that they could stand against any threat and prevail. Other representatives expressed concerns. Humans were violent by nature. Their culture glorified war and warriors. What if they decided to turn their weapons against the hegemony itself? What if they were simply using this alliance to gain access to new victims? Zorath answered these concerns as best he could. He said that humans valued loyalty above almost everything else. Once they considered someone a friend, they would die to protect them. The hegemony had nothing to fear from humanity as long as they remained true allies. And frankly, the commander added, the hegemony had everything to fear if they rejected this offer. A species as powerful as humanity would eventually expand throughout the galaxy. Better to have them as partners than as strangers. In the end, the vote was close but decisive. 14 species supported the alliance. 3 abstained, unwilling to commit but also unwilling to oppose. The motion passed. Humanity would be invited to join the Valoric's hegemony as its 18th member species. The announcement reached Earth 2 weeks later. Captain Daniel Hayes watched the official ceremony from his quarters aboard the Resolute. His ship had become famous throughout the fleet, the vessel that had made first contact and helped forge an alliance that would shape human civilization for generations. Daniel did not feel particularly heroic. He had simply done his job and hoped for the best. Commander Nathan Cole entered without knocking, a privilege of their long friendship. He reported that the crew was celebrating. Someone had managed to synthesize something resembling champagne from the ship's food processors, and the mess hall was getting loud. Daniel smiled and said that they had earned it. This mission had been tense beyond anything he had experienced before. For those first few hours, he had genuinely believed they might have to fight their way out of the system. Instead, they had made friends. Real friends. Not just political allies. He had seen it happening in real time. Humans and Valoric's learning to understand each other, finding common ground despite their differences. Nathan asked what happened next. Daniel said that everything changed. Humanity would have access to hegemony technology and trade networks. They would learn from species that had been spacefaring for millennia. And in return, they would share their own knowledge, particularly their expertise in defense and military strategy. He admitted that some people worried about this. They said that teaching aliens how to fight was dangerous. But Daniel disagreed. The galaxy was not a safe place. Predators lurked in the darkness between stars, species that valued conquest over cooperation. The hegemony had survived so far through luck and diplomacy, but luck always ran out eventually. Better to have friends who could fight than to face the darkness alone. 3 months after the alliance was formalized, the first joint patrol launched. The USS Resolute flew alongside 6 Valorix cruisers, their crystalline hulls gleaming against the backdrop of stars. They visited border systems that had long been threatened by raiders from hostile space. The raiders took one look at the human warship and disappeared into hyperspace without firing a single shot. Commander Zoreth commanded the Valorix contingent. He had specifically requested this assignment, wanting to see how humans operated in the field. What he observed impressed him deeply. The human crew was efficient and professional, but also warm and welcoming. They invited Valorix officers to dine in their mess hall. They taught card games and received lessons in Valorix music. By the end of the patrol, crews from both species were working together as if they had known each other for years. Zoreth transmitted his observations to the Hegemony Council. He reported that the Alliance was working even better than expected. Humans were not the monsters their biology suggested. They were complicated beings, capable of great violence and great kindness in equal measure. Their presence in the hegemony would change things, yes. But change was not always bad. Sometimes change was exactly what was needed. The galaxy took notice. Other species, ones that had not yet joined the hegemony, began sending diplomatic inquiries. Some were curious about these humans who had seemingly appeared from nowhere. Others were calculating, weighing whether the new alliance made the hegemony too strong to challenge. A few were hostile, sending threats and warnings that were promptly ignored. Captain Daniel Hayes continued his patrol duties for another year before accepting a promotion to admiral. His new position required him to oversee humanity's integration into the hegemony, a task that would occupy the rest of his career. He spent as much time with aliens as with his own species, learning their cultures and earning their trust one conversation at a time. He never forgot that first moment, when 12 crystalline ships had frozen in fear at the sight of his warship. He understood their reaction now. Humans were terrifying to species that had never known true danger. But terror could become respect. Respect could become trust. And trust could become something even more valuable. Friendship. The Valorix had a saying that dated back thousands of years. They said that the universe was vast and cold, and that only by huddling together could any species survive the long darkness between stars. Humans had their own version of this wisdom. They said that no one should have to face the night alone. 2 civilizations, separated by biology and history and countless light years of empty space, had found each other at exactly the right moment. The hegemony gained protectors who would stand against any threat. Humanity gained a family that stretched across the stars. And together, they began building something that neither could have achieved alone. A future worth fighting for. A future worth protecting. A future where no one had to be afraid, because friends stood ready to help. Commander Zoreth sometimes thought about that first terrible moment when he had looked upon the human warship and felt certain he was going to die. Now, years later, he understood how wrong he had been. He had not been looking at death that day. He had been looking at salvation. The shuttle bay of the Valorix flagship was filled with nervous crew members when the human vessel arrived. Commander Zorth stood at the front of the welcoming party, flanked by his senior officers. They had debated whether to bring guards, ultimately deciding against it. If the humans intended violence, a few guards would make no difference. Better to show trust and hope it would be returned. The shuttle itself was a blocky, angular craft that matched the aesthetic of the larger warship. It landed with precision on the crystalline deck, and for a moment nothing happened. The Valorics waited in silence, their scales twitching with anticipation and fear. Then the hatch opened. Captain Daniel Hayes stepped out first. He was taller than Zorth had expected, nearly 2 meters in height, with a solid build that suggested physical strength. Behind him came 3 other humans. A woman with brown hair tied back from her face, introduced later as Dr. Marie Sullivan. 2 males in different uniforms, security officers named Kevin Brooks and Tony Garcia. Though they carried no visible weapons, Zorth stepped forward and performed a traditional Valorix greeting, a bow with hands spread to show peaceful intent. Daniel responded with his own gesture, extending one hand toward Zorth. The commander remembered this from his cultural briefing. He reached out and grasped the human's hand. The touch was startling. Human skin was warm, almost hot by Valoric standards. Their blood carried heat through their bodies at all times, maintaining constant temperature, regardless of environment. Zorth could feel the strength in Daniel's grip, muscles and bones that could crush his own hand if the human chose. But the grip was gentle, controlled, respectful. Daniel said that he was honored to meet Commander Zorth in person. He thanked him for the invitation and for his patience during their initial encounter. He admitted that humans were not always skilled at making good first impressions. Zorth found himself laughing, a sound that surprised even him. He said that the humans had made quite an impression indeed. His entire fleet had been frozen with fear at the sight of their warship. Daniel smiled and said that the Resolute did tend to have that effect on people. They moved to a conference room that had been prepared for the meeting. The Valorics had provided chairs adapted for human body structure, based on measurements transmitted during their earlier communications. Daniel seemed pleased by this thoughtfulness. He said that attention to detail was a sign of good diplomacy. Over the next several hours, the 2 groups exchanged information about their respective civilizations. Dr. Sullivan proved particularly useful. She had spent years studying xenobiology and xenoculture, and she asked intelligent questions about Valoric society. The aliens found themselves relaxing in her presence. She had a gentle manner that seemed impossible for a species of predators. Zorth asked about this. He said that humans were clearly evolved from hunters. Their eyes faced forward for tracking prey. Their bodies were built for running and fighting. Yet Dr. Sullivan seemed almost peaceful, like a Valoric scientist rather than a human warrior. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. He explained that humans had many different personalities and roles within their society. Some were soldiers, trained for combat and protection. Others were scientists, doctors, artists, teachers, or farmers. Their evolution had given them the tools for violence, but their civilization had taught them to use those tools wisely. Most humans went their entire lives without ever harming another being. But, Daniel added, when harm came to those they loved, humans could become something else entirely. They called it protective instinct. A human who would normally never consider violence could become extremely dangerous if their family or friends were threatened. This was perhaps their defining trait as a species. They would do anything to protect their own. Officer Kethis asked a difficult question. He asked what happened when humans identified someone as an enemy. What happened when they decided that someone was a threat to their people? Daniel's expression grew serious. He said that humans preferred peace and would always seek diplomatic solutions first. But if diplomacy failed, if an enemy refused to stop threatening innocent lives, then humans would act. They would act decisively and without mercy. They would use every weapon at their disposal to eliminate the threat. And they would not stop until the threat no longer existed. The room fell silent. Zorath remembered what he had learned about the Kravik, a species that had attacked human colonies without warning. The humans had responded with overwhelming force. Within a decade, the Kravik were no longer a spacefaring civilization. Their homeworld had been blockaded, their fleet destroyed, their colonies occupied. They had survived, but they would never threaten anyone again. Zorath asked if humans regretted what they had done to the Kravik. Daniel considered the question for a long moment before answering. He said that humans regretted the necessity, not the action. They had tried everything else first. They had offered peace treaties, territorial compromises, economic incentives. The Kravik had rejected all of it. They had continued attacking human colonies, killing civilians, destroying everything humans had built. Eventually, there was no choice left. He said that humans took no pleasure in war. They understood its cost better than most species ever would. Their history was filled with conflicts that had killed millions of their own kind. They had learned from those tragedies. They had unified specifically to prevent such waste in the future. But unification had not made them weak. It had made them stronger than ever before. Zorath looked at the human captain and saw something that he had not expected. Behind those predator eyes, behind that warrior's discipline, there was pain. Daniel had seen things that no being should ever have to see. He carried burdens that would crush lesser creatures. But he kept going. He kept fighting. Not because he enjoyed it, but because someone had to protect those who could not protect themselves. The commander made a decision. He said that the Valoric's hegemony needed allies like humanity. Species that understood the galaxy as it truly was, dangerous and unforgiving. Species that could protect others when protection was needed. He said that he would personally recommend a full alliance to the Hegemony Council, with all the benefits and responsibilities that implied. Daniel extended his hand again. Zorath grasped it without hesitation this time. The warmth no longer felt strange. It felt like strength. It felt like hope. Dr. Sullivan asked if she could tour the Valaric ship and meet more of its crew. Xenobiologist Talia eagerly volunteered to serve as her guide. The two scientists left together, already deep in conversation about the differences between their species. Kevin and Tony relaxed visibly. One of them said that this was going better than he had expected. The other agreed, adding that it was nice to make friends for once instead of enemies. Zorath watched the humans interact with each other. They were informal, almost playful, joking and laughing despite the serious nature of their mission. This was another thing he had not expected. Predators who could be gentle. Warriors who preferred peace. Survivors who still knew how to smile. He thought about the future. The hegemony would change after today. Humanity would bring new ideas, new technologies, new ways of thinking about the galaxy. Some species would resist this change. Some would embrace it. But nothing would ever be quite the same. And somehow, despite everything he had feared when this mission began, Zorath found himself looking forward to it. Fleet Commander Zorath listened to the human transmission with growing amazement. The translation was imperfect, but the meaning was clear. The humans were inviting direct communication. They wanted to talk face-to-face, or as close to that as two species separated by the void of space could manage. After hours of tense silence, this felt like a breakthrough. His bridge crew exchanged uncertain glances. Officer Kethis pointed out that this could be a trap. The humans might be trying to lure them into a vulnerable position. Zorath acknowledged this possibility, but he did not believe it. If the humans wanted to destroy them, they could have done so already. That massive warship had enough firepower to eliminate the entire Valoric's fleet in moments. The fact that they were still alive suggested the humans had other, Intentions. He accepted the invitation and ordered his communications officer to establish a direct link. Moments later, the view screen flickered and changed. A human face appeared before them. Zorath had seen images of humans in their earlier transmission, but seeing one live and moving was different. The being had pale skin, dark hair cut short, and those distinctive forward-facing eyes that marked it as a predator species. It wore some kind of uniform, dark blue with metallic decorations on the shoulders. When it spoke, its mouth moved in strange ways, and the translator took a moment to convert the sounds into Valoric's language. The human introduced itself as Captain Daniel Hayes of the United Earth Fleet vessel Resolute. It said that it came in peace and wished to establish friendly relations with whatever civilization the Valoric's fleet represented. Zora responded in kind. He introduced himself and explained that he commanded a diplomatic mission from the Valoric's hegemony, a coalition of 17 spacefaring species dedicated to peaceful cooperation and mutual benefit. He said that the hegemony had detected human activity in this region and had sent his fleet to make first contact. Daniel nodded, a gesture that Zorath's cultural database identified as indicating understanding or agreement among humans. The captain said that humanity was new to interstellar travel, only about 200 years into their expansion. They had colonies on several nearby worlds and were always interested in meeting other intelligent species. Zorath felt some of his tension ease. The human seemed genuine in its desire for peaceful communication, but he could not forget what he was looking at. Behind Daniel on the view screen, he could see parts of the warship's bridge. There were other humans at various stations, and everything about their posture and behavior suggested military discipline. These were soldiers, not scientists or diplomats. He asked a question that had been burning in his mind since they first detected the human vessel. He asked why their ship carried so many weapons. Why did humans approach first contact in a warship instead of a vessel designed for peace? Daniel's expression changed in subtle ways that Zorath could not entirely interpret. The captain was silent for a moment before responding. He said that humanity had learned hard lessons throughout its history. Their species had fought countless wars against each other before finally unifying under a single government. Even after that, they had faced external threats from hostile species who saw them as easy targets. They had lost millions of lives before learning that strength was the best deterrent against aggression. Zorath absorbed this information with growing understanding. He said that the Valoric's had never faced such challenges. Their homeworld was peaceful, with abundant resources and no competing intelligent species. They had developed technology slowly and carefully, joining with other species through diplomacy rather than conflict. They had always believed that intelligence naturally led to cooperation. Daniel smiled, and Zorath noticed that his teeth were flat rather than pointed. Perhaps humans were not purely predatory after all. The captain said that he wished humanity had been so fortunate. Instead, they had evolved on a world that constantly tried to kill them. Extreme temperatures, violent weather, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, predatory animals, and diseases that could wipe out entire populations. Every generation of humans had been shaped by struggle and survival. Zorath found this explanation both fascinating and horrifying. He had studied dangerous worlds before, planets that had been quarantined by the hegemony due to their hostile conditions. The idea that intelligent life could evolve on such a world was remarkable. The idea that it could thrive was almost impossible to believe. He asked Daniel if humans feared anything. The captain laughed, a sound that the translator interpreted as an expression of humor or disbelief. He said that humans feared many things. They feared death and loss and failure. They feared the unknown and the dark places between stars. But they had learned that fear could be controlled. It could be channeled into preparation and vigilance. That was why they built warships and trained soldiers. Not because they wanted war, but because they refused to be victims ever again. The conversation continued for hours. Zorath learned about human history, their long climb from primitive tribes to a unified spacefaring civilization. He learned about their art and music, their families and communities, their dreams and ambitions. And the more he learned, the more his fear transformed into something else: respect, admiration, perhaps even the beginning of friendship. Daniel asked about the Valoric's hegemony. Zorath explained its structure and principles. 17 species working together for mutual benefit, sharing technology and resources, protecting each other from external threats. He admitted that the hegemony's military capabilities were limited. They had relied on diplomacy and economic pressure to resolve conflicts. Daniel said that humanity might be able to help with that. If the hegemony was willing, humans could offer their defensive expertise. They could help design better ships and train crews for combat situations that they hoped would never come. In exchange, they would ask for access to hegemony technology and trade networks. Zorath felt his heart beating faster. This was exactly what the hegemony needed. For centuries, they had worried about hostile species on their borders, aggressive civilizations that respected nothing but strength. The Valorics had no answer to such threats, but humans did. They had been forged in fire, and they knew how to protect what they cared about. He said that he would recommend such an arrangement to the Hegemony Council. But first, he wanted to meet Daniel in person. He wanted to stand before a human and shake hands, as the translator suggested their species did when forming agreements. He wanted to look into those predator eyes and see if he could truly trust what he found there. Daniel agreed immediately. He said that he would personally lead a small team to the Valoric's flagship. They would come unarmed, as a sign of good faith. Zorath tried to object, saying that was not necessary, but Daniel insisted. He said that trust had to start somewhere. Zorath ended the communication and turned to face his stunned crew. He told them to prepare the main docking bay for visitors. They were about to welcome humans aboard their ship for the first time in history. Cathis asked if this was wise. These beings were predators from a death world. Their entire civilization was built on war and violence. Could they really be trusted? Zorath looked at the view screen, where the dark shape of the human warship still hung in space. He said that he did not know, but he believed they were about to find out. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of the USS Resolute and studied the tactical display with calm, focused eyes. 12 unknown contacts had appeared at the edge of the solar system approximately 30 minutes ago. They had emerged from some kind of faster-than-light travel, though the energy signature was different from anything in the human database. Now, they sat motionless in space, and Daniel had no idea whether they were friends or enemies. The Resolute was a heavy cruiser, one of the newest ships in the United Earth Fleet. She carried a crew of 400 men and women, all of them trained professionals who had volunteered for deep space duty. Her armament included railguns, missile batteries, point defense lasers, and an experimental plasma cannon that the engineers called the Hammer. She was designed to protect humanity's colonies from any threat, and she had never failed in that mission. Lieutenant Lisa Porter worked at the communication station, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. She reported that the alien transmission appeared peaceful. The mathematical sequence was a standard first contact protocol, and the imagery showed no weapons or hostile intent. But she added that they were still analyzing the full message and could not be certain of anything yet. Daniel nodded slowly. He had been trained for this moment. Every officer in the fleet received education on first contact procedures, though most assumed they would never actually use it. Humanity had been exploring the galaxy for 2 centuries, and they had found plenty of dead civilizations and abandoned worlds. But living, intelligent aliens had remained stubbornly elusive until now. His first officer, Commander Nathan Cole, approached the command chair. Nathan was a tall man with graying hair and a face marked by 20 years of service. He suggested that they should power down weapons and approach the alien fleet in a non-threatening manner. Standard diplomatic procedure called for showing peaceful intentions. Daniel shook his head. He understood the logic, but he could not agree with it. Humanity had learned too many hard lessons about showing weakness. The colony wars had nearly destroyed their civilization. The Kravik attack had killed millions before humanity managed to organize a defense. Every time humans had assumed the best about others, they had paid in blood. He would not make that mistake with an unknown alien species. He ordered the ship to maintain combat readiness while transmitting a peaceful response. They would show strength and friendliness at the same time. If the aliens were hostile, they would see that humanity was not easy prey. If they were peaceful, they would hopefully understand that humans simply value caution. Lisa sent the reply, a mathematical sequence followed by images of Earth, its cities and landscapes and people. Daniel had personally selected the images years ago when he first took command. They showed humanity at its best, beautiful art and music and families and communities. But they also showed the fleet, powerful and ready. The message was clear. We want peace, but we are not afraid of war. The bridge crew worked in disciplined silence. Every station monitored different aspects of the situation. Sensors tracked the alien ships. Weapons remained charged and ready. Engineers stood by to maximize engine power if escape became necessary. Daniel felt proud of his crew. They were scared. He could see it in their eyes, but they did their jobs anyway. That was what made humans special. Science Officer Dr. Marie Sullivan called out from her station. She had been analyzing the alien vessels and had made some interesting discoveries. The ships were constructed from some kind of crystalline material that was both beautiful and apparently quite strong. Their energy signatures suggested advanced technology, possibly more advanced than human systems in some areas. But their weapons were minimal. She counted only 2 or 3 small defensive turrets on each vessel. These were not warships. Daniel absorbed this information carefully. A fleet of lightly armed vessels had traveled to an unknown system for first contact. That suggested either supreme confidence or genuine peaceful intent. He hoped it was the latter. Nathan pointed out that the aliens had not moved since they arrived. They were just sitting there, watching. He wondered if they were afraid. Daniel considered this possibility. The Resolute was an intimidating sight, especially to species that were not accustomed to military vessels. Perhaps the aliens were simply overwhelmed. He made a decision. They would wait and observe. The aliens had made the first move by traveling to human space. Now it was their turn to respond. If they wanted to communicate further, Daniel would listen. If they wanted to leave, he would let them go. But he would not lower his guard. Minutes passed. Then an hour. The alien fleet remained frozen in place. Lisa reported no additional transmissions, no movement, nothing. They were simply waiting. Daniel began to feel a strange sort of respect for the alien commander. Whoever was in charge of that fleet had discipline. They were not panicking or making rash decisions. Marie continued her analysis and made a troubling observation. She had detected life signs aboard the alien vessels, hundreds of beings on each ship. Their biology appeared to be carbon-based, similar to humans, but with significant differences. She suspected they were reptilian in nature, cold-blooded and scaled. Their ship design suggested they came from a relatively mild environment, probably a planet with stable temperatures and low geological activity. Daniel asked what that told them about their nature. Marie hesitated before answering. She said that species from harsh environments tended to be more aggressive and more prepared for conflict. Species from gentle environments were often more trusting and less experienced with violence. If these aliens came from a comfortable world, they might never have faced a serious threat before. They might not understand danger the way humans did. Nathan suggested that made them potential victims rather than potential enemies. Daniel agreed, but he saw another side to the situation. It also made them potential friends. A species that had never known war might be the perfect partner for a species that was tired of fighting. He ordered a new message prepared. This one would include an invitation for direct communication, ship to ship, with full translation protocols active. He wanted to talk to whoever was in command of that alien fleet. He wanted to understand their intentions and explain his own. Lisa sent the message. The bridge crew waited in tense silence. And then, finally, a response came. The aliens accepted the invitation. They wanted to talk. Daniel allowed himself a small smile. This was the moment humanity had been waiting for throughout all its long history. First contact with an intelligent alien species. Everything that came after would depend on what happened in the next few hours. He intended to get it right. He stood from his command chair and straightened his uniform. He told Nathan to keep the ship on alert, but to avoid any aggressive moves. Then he headed for the communications room to speak with beings from another world for the first time in human history. His heart was pounding, but his hands were steady. He was afraid, yes, but he was also excited. And underneath it all, he felt something that surprised him. He felt hope. The Resolute hung in space, her weapons ready but silent. Somewhere in the distance, 12 alien ships waited with equal patience. And between them, invisible signals carried words that would shape the future of two civilizations. The Valoric's diplomatic fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of an uncharted star system. 12 crystalline ships hung in the darkness of space, their smooth hulls reflecting the distant light of an unfamiliar yellow sun. Fleet Commander Zorath stood at the center of his bridge, watching the view screen as his sensors began mapping this new region of the galaxy. He had commanded diplomatic missions for over 40 cycles, and he had seen many strange things during his long career. But something about this system made his scales itch with unease. The Valoric's hegemony had detected unusual energy signatures coming from this sector several months ago. The pattern suggested a newly spacefaring civilization, one that had only recently discovered faster than light travel. The Hegemony Council had dispatched Zorath to make first contact and assess whether these beings might be suitable candidates for membership. Most young species were eager to join the hegemony, grateful for the protection and trade opportunities it offered. Zorath expected this mission to be routine. His junior officer, a young male named Kethis, called out from his station. The sensors had detected a vessel orbiting the third planet from the sun. Zorath ordered the image magnified on the main view screen. What he saw made him take an involuntary step backward. The ship was massive. It dwarfed even the largest Valoric's cruiser. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, composed of dense metallic alloys that seemed to drink in the starlight rather than reflect it. The design was angular and aggressive, with sharp edges and flat surfaces that spoke of function over form. But what truly caught Zorath's attention were the weapons. Dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, covered every surface of the vessel. Turrets, launch tubes, energy emitters, and other devices that his tactical computer struggled to identify. This was not a scientific vessel or a diplomatic ship. This was a machine built for one purpose only, and that purpose was war. Kethis spoke in a trembling voice. He said that their database contained no match for this vessel type. The species was unknown. Zorath nodded slowly, his mind racing through possibilities. In all his years of service, he had never encountered a first contact situation where the newcomers possessed such overwhelming military capability. Young species were supposed to be vulnerable, cautious, eager to make friends in a dangerous galaxy. They were not supposed to have warships that looked like they could destroy entire fleets. The Valorix were a peaceful species by nature. They had built their hegemony through diplomacy and trade, not conquest. Their ships carried weapons, yes, but only enough for basic defense. They relied on allies and treaties for protection against the galaxy's more aggressive inhabitants. Looking at that alien warship, Zorath understood that diplomacy might be their only option here. If this species was hostile, his entire fleet would be destroyed in minutes. He ordered his communications officer to transmit the standard greeting. This was a mathematical sequence designed to prove intelligent origin, followed by peaceful imagery and an invitation to communicate. The message was simple and universal. Any advanced species would understand its meaning. Zorath watched the view screen as the transmission sped toward the alien vessel. He found himself holding his breath. Several minutes passed. The alien ship did not respond. Zorath felt sweat forming on his scales. Perhaps they had not received the message. Perhaps they were analyzing it. Or perhaps they were simply deciding whether to open fire. He ordered the message repeated. Still nothing. The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances. The silence was unbearable. Then the alien ship began to move. It turned slowly, ponderously, like some great beast awakening from sleep. As it rotated, more and more of its weapons became visible. Zorath counted at least 60 separate turrets on the port side alone. The vessel's bow swung toward the Valoric's fleet, and Zorath saw something that made his blood run cold. The ship's forward section was dominated by a single massive weapon, a cannon of some kind that was larger than his entire flagship. He had no idea what it could do, and he did not want to find out. Kethis reported that the alien vessel was now facing them directly. All weapons appeared to be in standby mode, charged but not targeting. Zorath tried to find comfort in this, but he could not. The ship was watching them, waiting, testing their reaction. Navigator Veth spoke up from her station. She asked if they should retreat to hyperspace. It would take only moments to charge their drives and escape. Zorath considered this option carefully. Every instinct told him to run. But he had studied predator species during his training. He knew that fleeing could trigger a chase response. If these beings were hunters, and everything about their ship suggested they were, then running might be the worst possible choice. He ordered the fleet to hold position. They would remain calm. They would show no fear. They would wait for the aliens to make the next move. Xenobiologist Talia approached the command platform. She had been analyzing the alien vessel's construction and had reached some troubling conclusions. She explained that the ship's armor was designed to absorb and deflect energy weapons. The angular surfaces would cause projectiles to ricochet rather than penetrate. Every aspect of the design prioritized survival in combat. Whoever built this ship expected to fight, and expected to win. Zorath asked what kind of species would create such a vessel for their first ventures into deep space. Talia shook her head slowly. She said that most species developed weapons in response to threats. They built warships after encountering hostile neighbors, not before. For this civilization to already possess such advanced military technology, they must have faced terrible conflicts in their past. They must have learned through blood and fire that the universe was dangerous. They had prepared for the worst before they even knew what the worst might be. The bridge fell silent. Zorath looked at the alien warship on his view screen and tried to imagine the history behind it. What had these beings suffered? What had they lost? What had made them so afraid that they armored themselves in metal and bristled with weapons before taking their first steps among the stars? He realized that he was not looking at conquerors. He was looking at survivors. A new signal appeared on the communications console. The alien ship was finally responding. The message was simple, a mathematical sequence similar to their own, followed by images. Zorath watched as the view screen displayed pictures of a blue and green world, beautiful but clearly dangerous. He saw massive storms, erupting volcanoes, and vast deserts alongside frozen wastelands. He saw images of the aliens themselves, bipedal creatures with soft skin and forward-facing eyes. Predator eyes. Hunter eyes. And yet the final images showed something unexpected. He saw these beings reaching out their hands in apparent greeting. He saw symbols that his translator interpreted as representing peace and friendship. Zorath stared at the screen for a long moment. These beings came in a warship bristling with weapons, yet they spoke of peace. They looked like predators, yet they offered friendship. Nothing about this situation made sense. But Zorath had not survived 40 cycles in the diplomatic service by making hasty judgments. He ordered his crew to prepare a response. They would continue the dialogue. They would learn more about these strange beings and their terrifying vessel. And they would be very, very careful, because Zorath had a feeling that the galaxy was about to change forever. And he was not entirely sure that was a good thing. The Valoric's fleet hung motionless in space. 12 crystalline ships facing a single dark warship. Neither side moved. Neither side looked away. And in the cold silence between stars, two civilizations began the slow and dangerous process of learning to understand each other.